What is going on, Sailors of Eternum? Welcome back, welcome back. Today we're going to be breaking down the New World Alpha 3 announcement along with the changes they've released to their website about the build. A lot of this I'm actually very excited about, so without further delay, let's go ahead and jump right into this. It starts off with an introduction into what they're planning for this next phase. As they've mentioned on Twitter, this will feature a small group of testers, allow them to experiment with design ideas, and break things in the pursuit of making them much better. We don't get a lot more detail than that, but I really hope they're going to try to add some new features during this alpha test. Like we talked about before, we definitely need some love on the PvP side. Not sure which angle they're going to go on that, but harkening back to their previous delay announcement, they did say they were aiming to provide players with more mid-game to late-game experiences. So all that remains to be seen is what they come up with for PvP and PvE. For a chance to participate, they do have a sign up on their website that you can go to. If you haven't done it already once before, now would probably be the time. Also, if you did pre-order or were in a previous test, that does not guarantee access for this one. October 20th, meaning today, is when the first wave is going out. Sometimes they do giveaways on their Twitter, so that's also something you'll want to consider following. As the alpha goes on, I'm sure they'll start letting more people in though, so don't worry too much if you don't get in right away. Now the first juicy part that I wanted to dive right into is the combat changes. They start this one right off with the confirmation that Spear will indeed be in the next alpha. Of course we know that's only one of several upcoming weapons, but for now, this one will definitely do the trick. For those of you who didn't know, we've seen the Spear in multiple scenarios before this point, including various different screenshots, but also gameplay footage. During the GameStar event, they did show it off. We saw a little bit of how one of the skills should work. They had no skill icons for it during this time, but we do see the skill where we can throw the Spear. This weapon will now feature two different skill trees though. The Zoner, which is the one that will allow us to throw it and keep enemies at range, and then the Impaler, which does specialize in closing the gap to use quick attacks and employ status effects. Now the best part about this is that the weapon will scale primarily off of dex, but also benefit from strength, and this is exactly what I was hoping for. You saw it all the time during the alpha. A lot of people would rock constitution builds and strength or intelligence, but dexterity builds just weren't that popular. But I believe that having weapons that scale primarily off of dex would allow for some more build diversity, along with maybe having bonuses for wearing medium armor, so we don't just see the majority of people in heavy and light. Now Rapier is also an upcoming weapon, unless it's going to be thrown into the one-handed sword branch, and I would love for this one to also scale primarily off of dex. This seems like the start of us having some more mobile-based assassin type of players running around. Maybe in the future we'll even see hints of dual daggers. Along with the Spear, we'll also get a new questline for the legendary version of it. I'm assuming this has been added to the loot tables for max level corrupted breaches, so if you prefer that method, which I definitely do, be sure to keep that in mind. For the questers though, if you don't recall how to start the questline for the legendaries, be sure to check out my dedicated video on it to get a brief summary. If the process changes and they let us know publicly, I'll be sure to update it. Now the second big part is the cooldowns. They've actually taken off shared cooldowns, and now weapon switching is much faster. These were a big shocker for me. I wasn't sure if they were actually going to do this. A lot of people who have gotten used to this combat system know just how powerful of a player you can be if you can rotate between weapons and blast all of your cooldowns. But maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe there's a way this could work, like diminishing returns on crowd control like people have suggested. And also seems to be what they've done for the next change. We can now dodge roll without stamina after being stuck in multiple crowd control reactions. I was personally going to wish for some super armor being given to the sword and shield ability Last Stand. That way we can more easily counter hatchet users. But this probably would also work too. This can be used as a backup just in case anyone blows all of their stamina in the first 15 seconds of the fight, which is something I've done before as well. Another thing is that abilities that get interrupted before the active frame of the attacks are no longer put on cooldown. Now for the sword and shield skill called Last Stand specifically, this is great news. One of the biggest problems I've had with that skill when I used it in previous iterations for tanking is that it could get cancelled out right away, even at the slightest touch. It was not an insta-cast like Berserk from the hatchet, so sometimes it was downright annoying to try to activate, but a change like this should really help with that. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all meshes together, and Spear is 100% being added to my loadout this time around. Now, for the balance changes, this starts off with the hatchet. Previously, the Berserk ability lasted for 15 seconds, it has now been reduced down to 10. Berserking Endurance, which allowed you to extend Berserk by 3 seconds after every kill, has been reduced down to 2 per kill. Cull the Weak, which increased damage of light attacks by 30% against low health targets, has been switched over to heavy attacks instead. Rejuvenating kills, which allowed you to restore 20% of your health with hatchet kills, has now been reduced down to 5%, which thank hell for that. Then Relentless Fury, damage increased by 10% for each consecutive light attack, has been reduced down to 5%. They also have reduced honing on the second and third light attacks as the last change. Unfortunately for the life staff, speed of light distance has been reduced by 50% with an increased cooldown of 25 seconds. Now this can still act as a panic button or a good way to reposition yourself in PvP or PvE, but of course now we won't be able to use it for general travel. The spear might actually have a mobility skill on it from the sounds of the Impaler build, so that could be a little bit of why they're doing that. The next changes though, any melee attacks that hit an enemy's back now get a backstab bonus, but backstabs no longer cause knockdowns. Sorry Sword Bros, we gotta find a new way to CC people. I'm actually curious to see what the combat's gonna look like now with these changes. It would have been a serious problem if they took the shared cooldowns off but kept the sword knockdowns on. But we can still use hammers, so I'm not really sure how that's gonna go. But that sums up the combat. Those were some big changes. Some of those I wasn't expecting, but I like that they're willing to take that kind of risk. Now we have to see where that goes. Bit of a small change, but now the housing will display the following. We're going to see our decoration score, number of items we placed, and max amount we can place on the decoration UI. I kind of like this one because towards the end of the preview, I was starting to go a little crazy with the housing decorations. I actually capped out on furniture and was frustrated because I had more to place. For the AI, we now have a new threat system. Single threat values calculated per player. Higher threat means you have a higher chance of being selected as a target, but healing doesn't affect it just yet, but that will change. I think this is something that we really did need in combat, especially for higher tier player versus environment content. They also say that we will get skills to increase or decrease threat. If you guys don't know, the shield charge ability used to have threat generation on it, but it got swapped to a slow. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the one to get it back, or they might give us a full-blown taunt. Either way, this will make tanking Merc Guard and field bosses something you can do efficiently if it does work out. They've also made changes to the leveling system, starting with reducing the XP from corrupted breaches, and for killing creatures. This means, unfortunately, farming on the northern corrupted breaches might not be as viable for XP anymore, but we'll still have to do some testing on that one. But they didn't say anything about PvP and PvE faction missions aside from deliveries, so those might still be a good option. With the XP rates being reduced for mobs though, doing mass farming in a place like Scorpius Tower doesn't sound too good anymore, but I'll be sure to make an updated leveling guide next year as soon as we can. They've also increased the amount of attribute points we get per level, but I don't see any changes made to the actual cap. So after you max out one attribute, you might have a lot more to work with this time around. The next one is another big one though. Life Staff has been switched to Focus instead of Intelligence being its main stat. This one is very interesting, because I did also talk about in a previous video about how great it would be to see weapons scale off of focus in the future. Something like the gauntlets maybe, a weapon that turns you into a warlock, maybe a wand weapon, something like that. But I didn't expect the life staff to be the one. Their long-term goal is for focus to now be used for healing weapons instead of reducing cooldowns. I was planning to do some testing next time on focus builds to see how useful the cooldown reduction could be, but this works too. Especially if they add more healing weapons and support weapons in the future. Diminishing returns are also being added to the attributes alongside gear now giving us stats, but gems no longer provide attributes for your character. Now that does make me wonder how useful tier 5 faction gear is going to be now. That was one of the big things about getting it early. It came with the tier 5 gem for every piece. The perks were still good, but now the gems give elemental damage and family banes for armor, which I'm guessing they mean creature banes, like extra resistance versus angry earth or corrupted. The last changes though, these have to do with gear. They say they're adjusting level requirements and rarity mapping to prepare for a strong in-game gear chase. Gear now has specific level requirements instead of it being linked to the tier, and also the level requirement is now directly tied to its gear score. Higher rarity has a lower level requirement than lower rarity with the same gear score. So to translate, if you get a blue piece at eye level 300 and a purple piece at eye level 302, they should be relatively close in their level requirements is what I'm getting here. That's a good thing for crafters because that will allow you to keep making money. By selling gear to lower level players, that's better than the stuff they're wearing. And the last change says that rarity mapping is changed for legendaries being craftable and dropping from the world. This right here is a really good start. Crafters have had the short end of the stick with gear progression because once you max out, there's really no reason for you to wait for your crafter to get a decent purple weapon over just farming a legendary through the quest lines or the breaches. Stuff like this is really going to empower crafters to get viable equipment out to players, but I would love for them to take it a step further. I'm talking about Ascended gear, the idea we pitched a while ago. Us getting more tiers of gear, or even just one more that's capped at max level that can only be obtained through crafting or another special way. Something to give us a sense of accomplishment when we put the time in to reach that level of progression. We've also got 16 brand new gear perks, 9 including the reduced weight perks for different classes of items, and 7 that will affect threat generation. So this means during Alpha 3, those of you that get in will be able to somewhat start tanking content, even if you're using just a hatchet or spear. Does anybody remember how in games like WildStar or SWTOR, not only did you have melee-based tanks but also range-based ones? I think it'd be hilarious for someone to try it, and we've got to see this happen. Or at least spear tanking, and I know for a fact I'd love to do it. And with that, folks, that's all the changes they posted for the new alpha alongside the announcement. I'm really glad they said they're committed to releasing updates for their alpha client moving forward, because stuff like this is really good for getting theory crafting and conversations going for its feedback and game content. But what did you guys think about these combat changes? Me personally, I'm still on the fence about the cooldowns, but I'll have to jump in game before I judge too much. Thanks so much for watching, have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.